Hello, everyone. My name is Jenny Dodd. I'm the CEO of TAFE Directors Australia, and thank you for joining us for this session today that will really be looking at education technology and the focus of education technology on our vocational education and training sector and what that means in a broad range of things in terms of adapting the way we do things for students, meeting industry's needs, meeting expectations, academic integrity, a broad range of factors there. So thank you all for joining us. And can I begin by acknowledging that we are meeting collectively on the lands of the first peoples of this country. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal country in Canberra. And I also want to acknowledge everybody from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. The way we're going to structure our presentation today is we have two terrific speakers, and I'll introduce them both to you in a minute, but we're going to hear from both our speakers firstly, and then we're going to go to Q&A. As those of you know who've been with us before for a TAFE Talks, please place your questions and answers in the Q&A box. By all means use chat, but don't assume that we'll pick up any questions in chat. Make sure you use the Q&A box to place your questions. So we will structure it today that we will hear from both our speakers and then we will go to Q&A. So can I firstly give a big warm welcome to Claire Field. Claire is the principal of Claire Field and Associates, and Claire has been around the sector for a very long time, as many of you know. One of the things about Claire that she has really struck out in, and many of you who get Campus Morning Mail will see Claire's pieces of writing frequently coming through Campus Morning Mail, is that Claire has really focused on education technology and the impact of education technology on the work we do in vocational education and training and in TAFE. We had asked Claire earlier, late last year, if she would come into a TAFE Talks a bit later on in the year to talk about some of the research that she's doing. And then in the last fortnight, the whole discussion around ChatGPT just really exploded. So what we did was get on to Claire and say, can we get you in a bit earlier? Can we get you in at the start of the academic year when this really major change piece is happening to give your reflections on what it might mean for those working in TAFE. So Claire's got a very big history. She's worked in government positions in New South Wales, the Australian government. She's worked for TAFE New South Wales. She's worked for Mission Australia. She also served as the CEO of ACPET at the time, which was the private training provider peak body. Claire is a board member of MEGT, who's an associate member of TDA, and she's also the Australian Edtech Industry Hub EduGrowth board member, as well as being a member of the Australian Government's Pacific Australia Labour Mobility PALM Advisory Group. She has had a really significant role in education technology, and I think that is going to be broader than just the conversation about ChatGPT today. Secondly, can I introduce Dr. Suniti Rikkari? When we invited Claire, we thought, who is capable to give a really in-depth response? And Suniti, we felt, really had all of those conversations that she was driving through LinkedIn. And we thought Suniti from TAFE New South Wales, as the Director Educational Quality, was really going to be able to add to Claire's conversation. So Suniti has over 15 years experience in the Australian tertiary education sector, leading the development and implementation of innovative learning and teaching products at scale. She has a background in curriculum transformation, active technology enhanced learning, and building teacher capability. In recognition of her global leadership in these fields, she's a principal fellow of the Higher Education Academy, and she's currently the Director Educational Quality at TAFE New South Wales. So we're going to hear from Claire. Claire's got a PowerPoint. She's going to work us through that. Suniti's then going to give some reflections on what Claire says and what it means for a large TAFE like TAFE New South Wales, these educational technology changes, and then we'll go across to you in the audience for some Q&A. So thank you again, and over to you, Claire.
Jenny, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Let's go with just sharing these with you. So again, thank you for the opportunity, Jenny. I wanted to obviously talk through ChatGPT, particularly from a vet sector perspective, but I do think there's a couple of other issues which aren't immediate, but which the sector and particularly large TAFE institutes are going to need to be thinking through now, because inevitably there is significant change coming there as well. And that is personalised learning and assessment underpinned by AI, and also a bit of the change that's happening with immersive learning. But let's stick with, you're all here trying to get your heads around ChatGPT. So the first time I heard about this GPT technology was in a short Twitter thread from a tech consultant based in the UK. This was a couple of days before I stumbled across ChatGPT, and what he was doing wasn't yet with ChatGPT, it was with an earlier version. But if you haven't seen it yet, he shared a post about mentoring a young lad with poor literacy skills. And what he had done was built for him, very simply, you'll see in the second part of his Twitter thread, the facility to take his fairly, basic literacy skills and turn them into professional written communications for clients. This is a young man working in a landscape gardening business, and you can't possibly perhaps see that original example so well. So here it is blown up. So this guy, Dave, the landscape gardener, using this facility, which took a tech person, Danny Richmond, 15 minutes to create, no coding required. The young man types in, Sally, starts work at yours Monday from Dave. And within seconds, that is turned into a beautifully written, clear business email. Since this Twitter thread started in early December, I recently saw an article where they're both interviewed, and the young man, Dave, talks about actually using this technology is vastly improving his written communication skills. So that was the first that I'd seen of it, and I have to say my head started to explode thinking about it. Then you saw more examples of ChatGPT start to emerge. Obviously, it was first launched right at the end of November. And in the examples that I saw being shared on social media, many from university academics were talking about how it will transform written assessment and also the teaching of IT coding. And in my CMM column, trying to reflect on it and make sense of it, I included this quote. It's not, these fabulous words are not mine, but someone else reflecting on what this meant. Academics generating responses using ChatGPT that they say would get full marks in undergraduate studies, as well as being able to solve difficult program coding challenges in a matter of seconds. So this was clearly something that was highly disruptive, particularly to higher education, with its emphasis on written assessment, but also I was thinking we need to think through what this means in vet. So if you've been thinking about it and wondering, well, what on earth is it? Everyone's sort of talking about it. I'm not a tech expert, but the best way I can describe it is if you think about the autocomplete function that you've had when you send a text message for the last number of years, or when you're writing an email and your phone or your computer helpfully, or sometimes unhelpfully, suggests next words, right? Happy, usually followed by birthday. That kind of artificial intelligence, ordinarily when people start off a text message to someone saying happy, the next word they're going to use is birthday. This is that at a mind-boggling scale. ChatGPT is what's called a large language model, and it was built by giving this model, feeding it billions of sentences of text from the internet. And again, someone with a much, a better use of descriptive language than myself says, machines that have ingested an internet's worth of data, weighing up the relationships between things, are then able to generate content that appears to be new and original. And I think just before we move on from this, one thing to keep in mind, it was real human beings who helped get this model, this technology right. And if you're not aware of it, there's a Time magazine article about actually the damage that's done to some of those people. It was outsourced from the US, outsourced to workers in Africa, paid a pittance, and having to deal day to day with all the inappropriate, racist, sexist, revolting things that are written on the internet, so that when we type in our questions or our requests that we want this technology to do, it doesn't come up with the wrong answers. So there's humans all around this, and but it is pretty interesting, pretty scary, and pretty exciting all at the same time. So you can see quite clearly in higher education where there are, and upper secondary school, where there are lots of assessments that require students to write 500 words on this or 1,000 words on that. Obviously in VET, we do it differently, competency-based, demonstrate what you can do, except of course in the business services training package, where there is still a requirement to write reports, draft plans, etc. And when you think about the BSB package, and I'm not telling any of you things that you don't already know, of course, units from business services are imported into a vast number of other qualifications. When I last looked, there's 3,300 RTOs with at least one BSB unit on scope. So in some ways, this will touch you. And what I thought to do was, okay, get my head around BSB. What's a unit that's well used across the sector, working in a team? So within BSB XTW 301, one of the areas of knowledge evidence that the candidate must demonstrate is that they understand issues that can impact team performance and outcomes. So I sat down with ChatGPT and I asked, what are some of the issues that may impact team performance and outcomes? And literally within seconds, and apologies, I'm not sure why we've got that little, oh, there we go. Within seconds, it came up with an answer that is highly impressive to start students thinking about. Now, the next step is they can then go in and ask a range of other questions. But the reason why this is tricky for educators is because, oh, we're checking my browser. If I ask it, and I can't talk and type at the same time. So we'll just pause for one moment. If I ask it the same question, it will literally come up with a similar but different answer. This is not plagiarism. There is no copy and pasting. This is about this amazing tool going through all of those billions of sentences that it has been trained on and learned, and giving you back an answer. And of course, they're all very similar because there's only a certain number of issues that can impact team performance and outcomes. But no two students, even if they all use ChatGPT, are going to come up with exactly the same answers to any of the written assessment tasks that you set them. If we look at coding and the ICT training package, there's a requirement that students will learn to design and build scripts. And one of those is to create pseudocode and describe logic required in script. Now, I understand what all of those words mean, but I know nothing about coding. Well, that doesn't matter because I've got my friendly, helpful ChatGPT. So I asked it to create pseudocode and describe the logic required in script, and it did. It wrote all of that. And I'll just give you a minute just to get your head around quite what it's done and what it's telling you. But again, it will give a very different answer. We want to just, yes, we do want another go at this. So let's ask it again, exactly the same question. And there you go. An entirely different approach to it. So this is going to challenge the BSB training package, right? This technology only emerged in December and is already creating potential challenges in terms of the assessment tasks that you set your students. Similarly, if you're involved in IT and offering coding, but more importantly than that, it's changing the way people work in a whole lot of particularly white collar, but a large number of other industries. And I think the BSB training package is under some stress. And I've been, again, thinking about this because, as Jenny said, I have been around in this sector for a while, and I was sitting there in ANTA, the Australian National Training Authority, when training packages were first introduced. Now, I didn't work on them, but someone, a lovely man called Craig, who worked very near to me, he did. And so did the rest of the team. And a model of ensuring greater national consistency and greater employer input into the skills that workers are taught for different occupations made sense 30 years ago, and it's lasted a long time, that model. It's probably still fine for plumbers and electricians and hairdressers, right? AI is not probably going to take over from my hairdresser or yours just yet. But in a number of occupations, there is already significant use of AI. And the challenge with it is how quickly it is changing things. So some of you will already have seen that Google has launched its version attached to its Google search function. It's called the Bard. One of the very interesting things I saw was someone had channeled William Shakespeare and used ChatGPT to write a cease and desist letter to Google saying that the Bard's name should not be taken in vain. Right? And Microsoft obviously is heavily invested in this, and they're building it into all of their suite of products. That's in the 2 months since this technology has become publicly available. It is changing the work that architects, furniture, and interior designers do, not ChatGPT, but AI. Have a look at this absolutely gorgeous chair. You would all be aware of, I assume, or many of you will be aware of, the fabulous designer, Philippe Starck. He sat down with the team at Autodesk, another AI design company, and asked their AI bot to create a strong, stable chair using minimal materials. They went back and forward, he and the chatbot, a little bit, and designed that incredibly beautiful chair. Thinking back to ChatGPT and its focus on text, the work of data collection and processing across businesses, across government, coding, customer service agents, developing fitness plans was one that I'd seen, editing, game creation, right? Text to video, text to a whole raft of music, the creative industries, much more susceptible to disruption through artificial intelligence than probably I had assumed even a couple of years ago. Journalism, language translation, lawyers and paralegals, marketing, you can read it. This is changing work people do and changing it incredibly quickly. And I worry that particularly the BSB package is going to be under enormous stress in the years ahead. Even with the best will in the world and the new Jobs and Skills Council model, even if we were to speed up the training package approval process, this stuff is changing by the month, not by the year. And it is something that our universities have a distinct advantage over vet providers, universities and some higher education institutes where they have self-accrediting status. It can take weeks to update and amend a higher education course, and I'm not telling many of you anything that you don't already know. So their ability to hear from employers and make changes to their course content to better reflect how our AI is changing the work people do in different occupations is going to be much more seamless and much more timely than our ability to do that within the vet sector. And so I think we're going to need a real conversation about, particularly around business services. There's a number of positives in that training package model, but it looks like the changing world of work is changing at such a pace that model may no longer be as appropriate as it was. So keep an eye on, and no doubt as I'm talking, jobs are changing. But I did want to talk about something that I think in the longer, not long term, but longer term, as in not next month, but down the track is something that again is going to bring many benefits, but also challenge the vet sector and a number of our existing processes. And that's AI for personalised learning and assessment. So AI has been being used for a number of years by learning management systems, Edtech providers working with schools and universities, a little bit in the vet sector, but a lot in the upskilling and reskilling of the existing workforce outside of formal vet to accelerate learning, better student engagement, reduced teacher workload. I kind of think of it like RPL in real time and truly competency-based and not time-based progression. And there's this lovely diagram on the Century Tech website. They are a LMS provider working in the UK with a number of schools, universities, and also their further education colleges. So super briefly and quickly, because I think Suniti's going to talk a bit more about this, an initial assessment of all students starting a course, and then a personalised learning plan built for that student. So if I enroll in a cybersecurity course tomorrow and Jenny happens to enroll in the same one and all the rest are very young tech-focused people, chances are that the young, very tech-focused people will know probably a lot more at their starting point than Jenny and I. Now, Jenny's run large TAFE institutes, had to deal with cybersecurity issues, so she definitely knows more than I do. I'm a woman with a laptop, right? So we'll start the course, do that initial assessment, and then are given individual lessons tailored to what we do know and what we don't know and where we have gaps. So I will need additional support. It might be that I'm going along quite well, but there's something that I just haven't come to grips with. It will automatically give me additional lessons and support to help me get across those concepts that others already know or are flying through, that the way the course is taught it is helping them, and I'm just in the slow lane, so to speak. This is transformational, but it will radically change how you manage your institutions, how you manage your teaching workload, semester by semester study, right? We talk about competency-based progression, and I know many of you do that. This is doing it at scale for all of your students. This is literally allowing people to fly through if they really have done do know and have that understanding of the course and the topic that you are teaching. If you're not familiar with it, one of the good examples that's been discussed at last year's English Australia conference was the Duolingo English test. It's the personalised assessment. Can test in 1 hour what traditional tests can test in 3 hours, with academics independently verifying that that is true. Now, I'm conscious of time. Many of you have moved into augmented reality and virtual reality. Just before you invest too much more into all the headsets and technology that you're currently using, keep an eye out, because this is also a sector that is going through some pretty profound changes. This is some technology that's already been rolled out across US high schools in many states. Oh, there we go.
Welcome to the real world of virtual reality on the zSpace platform. What is zSpace? It's a tabletop virtual reality that's transforming education today, regardless of whether students are learning at school or remotely. zSpace functions as your typical Windows PC until you open a zSpace application, and then the magic really begins. Long story short, zSpace tracks the user's stylus in real time, allowing the user to comfortably reach in, interact, move around, dissect, blow up, or change different variables within the environment.
Now, I don't know zSpace. I'm nothing to do with them. I've just seen this technology, and again, it blew my mind, and I started to think about, okay, there are changes happening in immersive learning that institutions need to be aware of before they invest too heavily in technologies that are likely to be superseded. And that's backed up in research that the team at Holland IQ shared recently. This is their look back over 2022. Where did the venture capital funding in the Edtech sector globally, where did it go? It went into management systems. And I should just pause there, because I did have a chat with somebody this week when they saw this session advertised, to remind me that there are learning management systems in Australia today that are already incorporating AI, ChatGPT, etc. into them. I'm not here to do advertisements. Go away, check with your LMS provider, make sure you're getting all that you can out of your management systems. Where else did the funding go? It went into student and teacher support, but it also went heavily into experience, right? Experiential learning, AR, VR, immersive, and as well as skills and jobs, but that's a topic for a whole nother webinar. And just in case this is of use to you, again, this is from the team at Holland IQ. These are some of the organisations and the different areas, different fields and occupations that they're offering VR and simulated learning for. And I think RMIT is involved and using Labster. I'm not sure if any of the rest of you are, but if you're not, this may well be of use to you. So ChatGPT is here. You are going to need to think about how to tackle that, what kinds of assessments to be focusing on. But it is going to change, and it's going to keep changing. There are equity implications if we build it into all of our teaching and learning, and then students have to pay to use it, right? So lots to be thinking about. That's in our face today, but there's some broader shifts happening which are going to change teaching and learning and assessment within the vet sector. Jenny, thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire, and thanks for that really quick drive through ChatGPT, but also some of the other educational technologies that are changing the way in which we do things. I'm going to hand across now to Suniti for some reflections, and then we'll come back to you, Claire, for some reflections on Suniti and some questions. So over to you, Suniti.
Thanks, Jenny. And thanks for that thought-provoking presentation, Claire. It's the synergies between personalized learning and assessments is something that I want to focus on, particularly in my reflections, because we know for assessments in particular that we don't have, like you said, some of the challenges that, some of the other sectors like the higher education sector is grappling with. But like Claire, I think we have a real opportunity to increase the amount and the way in which we provide that immediate personalized feedback to students. And, things just real-time feedback on tasks is something that our students in the vet sector have been asking for. And there's definitely an opportunity with tools such as ChatGPT, and Claire provided some really interesting immediate examples of how that could be done to provide that meaningful and actionable feedback that students can then use to improve their learning. So let's start with inclusive, flexible, and personalized learning. Following on from Claire's thoughts on this earlier, we know that AI can be used to analyze students' performance data and learning preferences. For example, tools such as ChatGPT can recommend learning materials and also allow us to adjust the difficulty level of activities and assessments that are really based on an individual student's progress in real time. AI can also provide recommendations for teachers on how to support individual learners, which is sort of the flip side of the support and the way in which teachers can then start to use tools such as ChatGPT. And we all know that we have a diverse cohort of learners in the vocational education sector, and tools such as this could really ensure that students are receiving a learning experience that's optimized for their diverse needs and also their diverse abilities. And the other area that I wanted to quickly reflect on is in the area of assessments. Now, there's a lot of talk about assessments. I have a few examples of some of the particular areas that we're looking at from our experience at a large TAFE provider. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and if you've got any examples that you'd like to share with us in the chat as well. But two ways that we're looking at is, of course, using AI and tools such as ChatGPT for real-time feedback, support, and guidance. So this could mean that we can use the tool to provide real-time feedback to students themselves, help them identify areas for improvement, provide guidance on then how to progress to the next task, and really then use it also as a mechanism for teachers to support that student progress. The other way we're thinking about, particularly using this sort of technology is in what's known as adaptive testing, where we can start to adjust the difficulty level of assessments based on a student's progress. And this is, of course, for formative assessment tasks where we can then give them an opportunity to practice, do some really low stakes first practice assessment tasks with tools such as this. Other examples could be, we're exploring using AI in interactive role play as a virtual learning assistant that, promotes accessibility, for example, for neurodiverse learners. Use it as a conversational AI tool. And it, from Claire's example earlier, how the tool was used to improve language skills, we could potentially use it in a similar way to improve other types of skills. I want to briefly touch on academic integrity, even though I know that assessments and academic integrity and the impact of ChatGPT in these areas is, sort of a whole topic in itself. And there are going to be many comments and discussions on this. But one thing I'd like to say is at TAFE New South Wales, we're using this as an opportunity for us to update the assessment policy and really design and develop alternate assessment methods which are less susceptible to academic integrity concerns. And we can focus on scaffolding, providing feedback, giving students the opportunity to develop incremental skills. All of those problem solving, critical thinking, knowledge retention skills that are really essential for success in their future careers which, as Claire mentioned, are changing as we speak because of the impact of tools such as ChatGPT. And finally, I'd like to end my reflection with some ethical and social questions. Now, there's also an imperative on us to ensure that when we use artificial intelligence or tools such as ChatGPT in our sector, and really in any sector, that we don't perpetuate biases and we ensure that the work that we're doing with these tools is inclusive, culturally sensitive, and accessible for all. And so potentially continued investment in research and development is really crucial to ensure that this technology is safe, secure, and aligned with our ethical values. And this is something that we can start to do as we start to interact with the technology more and more. It is a tool that is constantly learning. And as a colleague pointed out to me the other day, this is the least effective that this tool will be, because it will only improve and learn over a period of time. So as you can see, Jenny, lots for us to ponder and discuss as a sector. And thanks for the opportunity, Claire, to provide some reflections on this fascinating area of development.
Thanks, Aniti. There's been a question raised in the questions before I hand back to Claire, but the last question that is there is around how can you recognise if a student has used ChatGPT? And I'm going to make a comment on that because I used it in my newsletter a couple of weeks ago, and someone pointed out to me, and they were quite right, that there was a word that was not how a human would have normally written that. And the word was personalize or something like that. And I reflected, yes, with very close attention to detail, you could probably pick up where the tool was not, where the tool had been used. But that requires a lot of attention to detail in the way a student is writing. But I think there's that other comment, Suniti, that you've made. We're just at the beginning of this. So one can assume that in a few months' time, given this has developed over just a couple of months, it's going to be, that little hiccup will probably be fixed and so on. So there's a range of ways in which I think people have got in front of them. Claire, I'm going to hand back to you now to add into any conversation around anything you'd like to add to Suniti, and then we will turn our attention to some of the other Q&A.
Sure, thanks, Jenny, and really fascinating, Suniti. Thank you for that. And I should have probably spent, as I rattled through all of that, a bit longer on the academic integrity issue, and it's great that you guys are updating your policies and thinking through what it means. I would really urge extreme caution. I think there are data privacy issues and some ethical issues if we are thinking, and there are, they've already been assembled and other people are building them, detectors of ChatGPT. Take your students' assessment task and pop it up in our, upload to our website, and we'll tell you whether this was created by ChatGPT or not. So go the TAFE New South Wales way, focus on authentic assessment. Why? Because these detection bots are often wrong, right? They get between 25% right and 80% right. And again, they're changing and updating all the time. Imagine if you are the student that's really tried hard, that hasn't used ChatGPT, and you've done a really polished, written assessment task, and you're one of the ones where the error is made. And it mistakenly thinks it's ChatGPT, because this isn't like plagiarism, right? It's a guess. Is it most likely based on the language? Oh, that's a slightly odd word to use. We think this is more likely artificially generated. And there's also some data privacy issues. If you're using one of these detectors, who are you giving your students data and work to, and what are the implications of that? So it is a mindset shift. We need to be looking at more authentic practices rather than trying to rely on technology to outpace this technology.
Thanks, Claire. That probably leads us to a couple of questions that are in the Q&A. And the first one I'm going to pull out is from Carmel in TAFE Queensland. How should TAFE change its assessment? And this could be to either of you, really. You've both touched on it, but maybe some real specifics here. How should TAFE change assessment system to recognise greater use of ChatGPT? And a second part of that is around the notion of cheating. I think, Claire, you addressed plagiarism, because it's not really about plagiarism, but it is certainly around a potential that an individual may not be truly trying to develop their own work. Depends how you use it. But let's go with the first one first. How should TAFE change its assessment systems to recognise greater use of GPT? We'll go to you first, Claire, and then to you, Suniti.
Sure. One of the things, so we can talk about more authentic, and I think probably Suniti, with the work that they're doing, will probably have some good examples on that. One of the things that it occurs to me, which I've seen a couple of people starting to reflect on, and actually I first used it to have a go at writing an early CMM article, and noted that it was particularly poor when I asked it to write about something very specific and very localized. So I asked it to write me 300 words on issues impacting regional dual sector universities in Australia. It's fair to say at the moment, it doesn't know all that much about them. So one of the things, if you are currently using a lot of written assessments for your BSB qualifications and units, is to at least start thinking about how you can tweak them to make them as localized as possible, or to make them as recent as possible. At the moment, these tools are primarily not running on real-time data. They've been trained on information. At this stage, again, it's all moving up until 2021. And then the other thing I would say, sorry, Suniti, coming to you, is try it yourself. As a teacher, go to it, type in what you think the question is that you're going to ask, and see how good or not the response is that you get. If you get back a very good response, you've got some work to do on changing that assessment task, if you keep it as a written task.
That's exactly right, Claire. I was going to say that we're currently developing some tips for teachers on how to sort of start using some of these, start using ChatGPT in their teaching. And one of the things we recommend is to evaluate how well your assessments can be completed by ChatGPT, because that is a really good indicator of assessing the validity of that assessment, and then potentially, also using it as a mechanism to check students' understanding of what ChatGPT is generating. It's about having, I think, an open and honest conversation around integrity, and if students are using something like ChatGPT, maybe potentially saying to them, use it as a reference, like Jenny did when she sort of referred to it in some of the work that she used it in. Absolutely being open about it, not trying to hide the issue, because the issue, it's not going to go away. And then, really being clear about what the consequences of potential breaches would be. But I think all of our written assessments, as you said, would have to be rethought, redesigned. And again, an opportunity for us to really think about how we can do that in an authentic way that still provides students with those opportunities to learn. And I think tools such as ChatGPT will provide those opportunities for students to learn because of that personalized element.
There's a note. No, you go, Claire.
Can I just bounce off where Suniti's sort of taken us to? Because One of the recent examples that I saw, and again, I would caution about rushing to embrace it into your teaching and learning at the moment, because I do think we need to work out, are some students going to be priced out of it? But Johns Hopkins University in the US, they have this 5-day course, malware analysis and reverse engineering, right? Blows my mind just even understanding the title of the course. So it's tech-based, it's about IT things. Runs over 5 days. They normally find that about half the students drop out, right? There's no prerequisites for it, and half can't keep pace, even searching on Google when they don't quite understand terms that the teacher is talking. It's taught intensively in a classroom. This year, they asked students to bring their laptops and have ChatGPT open the entire 5 days. And what they found was overwhelmingly, most students completed, because when they had questions, they could get quickly up to speed on the answers while their lecturer was still talking. So they didn't fall behind waiting for Google and going through search results. They didn't feel embarrassed about asking dumb questions. Like Suniti's talked about, it's a bit like a coach for you or student support. It also allowed, because students mostly kept pace with the lecturer, it allowed for a much higher level of conversation and learning than they would normally get to. So there can be some real advantages. And when we see where this lands, does it get incorporated into Microsoft Word and everybody's using it every time they open their laptops, then it is a chance to think about incorporating it. And there could be some real positives out of it. But for many of us, don't turn the world on its head just yet.
So there is a bit of commentary, and you've just alluded to it a bit there. Is this an equity issue then, in terms of we're seeing, I understand quickly payment will be part of this process. Is that an equity issue, in particular for our TAFE students, where we've always had issues around equity and how do we take down as many barriers as we can?
Yeah, unquestionably. If they're pricing it at, so I've heard talks of US $20 a month. And that gives you faster access to it, more up to date. At the moment, they've had, I think, 5 million users at a time, and at times it crashes and you've got to wait your turn to log into it. I suspect that, again, there might be, yes, pricing for a better, quicker version. But if we start to see Google including this into its search and Microsoft building it into the whole Microsoft suite of products, then again, once we get to that stage, it's likely to be widely and freely available. And then people will monetize it to do various things, right? Use our AI bot to draft interview questions or to process various things. And so for students, it could land at an equitable place, but we are definitely not there yet. And if it doesn't land there, there could be really significant equity issues. Absolutely.
But I guess we also have to reflect, every time there's a major change, there's an equity issue, isn't there? There's a group who can afford to keep pace with that change. And then in our sector, in TAFE, there's always going to be those students for whom that's a challenge. And we actually saw it through COVID, as most of the TAFEs know, those students who didn't have the hardware to be able to learn from home and so on. And we had to, as TAFEs, then start to put in place different ways in which we worked with our students around that. More on that at the next TAFE Talks, but I'll come to that at the end. But I think, you know, that it's always going to be a difficult one around equity and how we keep pace with that change. Claire, you said in Campus Morning Mail, VET has more to fear than higher education from ChatGPT. What did you mean by that?
That's going to that point about the training package model. And someone, I think it was Alison, might have written one of her questions or observations that financial services is also being heavily disrupted by AI. So I do think our reliance on this, even at best, 2-year process from when industry says we need a change, going through the proper consultation processes, writing it all up, going back out again for consultation, then going through an approval process. And even though we're looking to streamline that with the new arrangements, then we've got to go through a process where the regulators allow you to add this is radically different qualification or unit to scope. ASQA is currently struggling with the amount of changes to scope they're going through, currently 6 months, and that's their service standard. Then you've got to get it added to scope, and then you've got to start enrolling. So we are going to be years out of date in teaching people about work that is changing in chunks of time measured in months, particularly at the moment in business services. Again, garden landscaping, hairdressing, etc. That's not the issue. Those processes of consultation still work and work well. But I really think universities with their self-accrediting powers, there is huge stress on the BSB training package, I think, and I think the sector needs to be ready for a conversation about self-accrediting powers for TAFE institutes and some other vet providers, in the same way that in higher education you have that for universities and some other higher education providers, because otherwise the business sector will not be able to rely on us to graduate workers who understand how to use this technology in all of the jobs that the people are going to go into.
Well, if ChatGPT causes the disruption to those training package processes, nobody in TAFE will be sad about that. So that might be a very positive outcome of all of this. Let's take a bit of a side turn now, and I might throw this one to Suniti. Schools, we've heard some of the schools, and I think the Department of New South Wales might be one of them, are going to ban ChatGPT in schools. Now, TAFE New South Wales has a significant program through schools. What do you think that means, A, for students in schools, and B, for students who are coming in our partnerships from on school into TAFE? Over to you.
A very small question, Jenny, to ask, and I'm going to channel our wonderful Chief Product and Quality Officer, Margot McNeil, here, where she says, never waste a crisis. So we're going to use this as an opportunity for us to really rethink the way that we, as I was saying earlier, we design and develop assessments. And at the moment, TAFE New South Wales hasn't taken the same direction as the Department of Education. We haven't banned ChatGPT or any other, sort of generative AI tools. And what we're really looking at is the opportunity to use this crisis to update assessments and, sort of some of the things that Claire was saying about really using this as an opportunity to even reflect on the whole training package system and the way that we are, moving towards potentially self-assurance or self-accreditation for particular, sort of TAFE providers. So I think there are lots of opportunities. I'll provide my measured response, which is, let's see where this technology takes us. Let's see what sort of ways students, in particular students that are transitioning from school into vocational education or higher education, sort of some of the ways in which they're bringing in their thoughts and their feedback into the process that can then provide us with opportunities to improve our assessment practices, learning design, etc. So, really using that groundswell to see what are our opportunities for change here.
Thanks, Suniti. And Claire, one to you. You've worked in this field for a long time in terms of international education. Any thoughts on what this might mean? And you made the comment about competency-based as opposed to time served. What about for our, and this is a question in the chat, which, in the Q&A, which I'm paraphrasing, what about our international students? What might be the impact for them?
I think it's all positive if, and it will inevitably have to happen, student visa requirements change, right? Inevitably, the notion of time served sitting in classrooms, right? Students will be here and doing their learning, but if they are able to complete their course more promptly, backed up by, this isn't just a cheap and nasty provider shooting them through more quickly and they don't really have the skills, right? There is a lot of academic research that, done properly, personalized learning and assessment is rigorous, and it's as good as, if not better than, our traditional models. So if international students come here and truly understand all of the information and requirements of a qualification, vet or higher education, and pass their assessments, whether they do that in a shorter period or a longer period of time should be immaterial to them, A, gaining the qualification, and B, potentially going on to post-study work rights and a later option for permanent residency. What we want is the learning to be real and credible. We don't want short courses because they're dodgy, but if people can learn and be certified as having learnt and it's rigorous, there's no issue with it. But it's going to take colleagues in Home Affairs a very long time, I think, to wrap their heads around it.
There's so much that that this new tool stimulates in the conversation. But what's been great about today, and I want to thank Claire Field and Suniti Ricari for leading this conversation about good assessment. And that at the end, good learning and teaching, good assessment, that is actually about what we do in terms of exiting people through our TAFEs for the workforce and for the jobs in which they have enrolled to complete those courses. I want to thank you both, Claire and Suniti, and do a plug for 2 more TAFE talks. One's in August, I think it's August, which we have actually identified around VR, virtual reality, and immersive learning, and that'll be led by TDA's network that actually lead that conversation for all TAFEs around what are they doing in terms of virtual reality and some of this innovative jazz. And the second is for our next TAFE talks, which is on the 8th of March, which is around, it's on International Women's Day, and it's around leadership. And it's around the crisis that was faced through COVID and what that meant. And we've invited 2 of our leaders, our women leaders, our 2 CEOs, Mish Eastman and Sally Curtin from Victoria, to lead that conversation, coupled with Kit McMahon from WAVE, who's to have that conversation. And some of that was also around how technology had to be used through that moment in time. So I think we've reached the end of today. Claire, any 1-minute comment from you before we sign off?
Petula asked a question about should we be incorporating it into some of our teaching qualifications. Yes, we need to be starting to think about it, inevitably. But again, pace yourselves, focus on assessment first. That's where the real rub is. But down the track, absolutely. This is here to stay and it will continue to evolve. And thank you for the opportunity to chat, Jenny and Suniti. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Claire. And any final comments from you, Suniti?
I'm just going to say ditto, Claire. I think really great opportunity for us to rethink assessment in a meaningful and outcomes-focused way. So, and also thank you very much for the opportunity to have this conversation. I know it's only the start of something that's going to be really exciting.
So thank you both for really sharing some insights on what is a very recent development. We really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Suniti. Bye all now.
Bye.